Just trying to wade in, trying to get some people on board. Hope everybody's having a good Saturday. It's a pretty cool day here in Las Vegas. Temperatures are actually in the low 60s, and we're almost the end of May, believe it or not. Wow. All right, everybody, welcome on board. So I have some mixed news I wanted to bring up, but I do believe there's going to be a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. As you know, the Nevada State Legislature, in the last minute, introduced a bill regarding guns, which many people believe is anti-Second Amendment, SB 452, introduced by State Senator Canizaro, who somehow claimed to only win by 100 or so votes in the last election, introduced a gun bill, which obviously, the worst part about it, it was backed by the casino elites and the Culinary Union. And those were the only few backers, along with the Every Town for Gun Safety, a organization backed by Michael Bloomberg. You can pretty much see who runs the show. Folks, I've been telling you this for years. They are the culprits. They are the reason why Nevada is so dirty. When are people going to finally wake up? When are people going to finally spread the word? I think it's time for people like myself, again, to pass more flyers, to put more banners, more billboards, all these different things to make sure that, well, people understand what's going on. And I'm just reading in the comments, the movie Casino. Things are probably worse than they were back then, believe it or not. In fact, that's probably the worst thing that came out of legalized gambling is this horrible, disgusting political machine. Anyway, MGM Resorts CEO, the former guy, Jim Murren, said it at best. We change laws, and we regularly do it. And I spoke in the testimony. They shut me out when I was speaking the truth. The casinos backed it. I believe Wynn backed it. Many other interests did. You can see what the whole Route 91 incident was all about. Even the legislatures talked about it. Why weren't there police coming in time to stopping the shooters? Why didn't security do their job? There's all these trouble revelations that's going on, folks. And here's the really, really sad part about all this. Culinary was the only person that spoke in support. It's so funny. And yet you had many other left-wing groups, I believe the ACLU and PLAN, the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, despite the fact that they're funded by a lot of other big money interests, they spoke in opposition, folks. The left-wingers are having a civil war. The Democrat Party chair, Judith Whitmer, who I get along with, we had a very nice conversation about 15 months ago, who's sick of the Harry Reid agenda and all that. She's mentioning comments about Israel that's frightening people like Susie Lee and Jackie Rosen. There is absolutely a civil war that's going on. But here's what's really disgusting about the Culinary Union. They said, oh, we believe in safety, and we're doing this because of racial justice. We're the largest minority organization in Nevada as well for immigrants. See, they're promoting this identity politics bullcrap so that they can carry on their agendas, pump their politicians, and back agendas that are often in the same interest as these large casino players and the politicians, and it's all connected by Wall Street. No duh. Get with the program, folks. You see what's this whole identity politics, the race card, the social justice, the woke culture. You see what this is all about. It's no wonder why former Democrat North Las Vegas mayor, who's now running for governor, he is speaking out against this. It's getting out of hand. It's all benefiting the Wall Street corporate elites. I tell you what, whatever the billionaires back, whether it's Wall Street regulation that benefits them, whether the billionaires are advocating against the breakup of the banks, whether the billionaires advocate for gun control, they advocate to efforts to prevent income inequality reductions, whether they advocate for mass immigration, you believe the opposite of what the billionaire Wall Street class gives you. They're behind the casinos, and they're certainly behind the real estate speculative sector that you see all this disgusting low quality architecture, all these home price bubbles, all this horrible urban planning that we've been seeing for decades. They are the culprit of what's really wrong in Nevada. And they control many states and they control much of the world. Folks, George Carlin said his best. We have owners of this country. And another thing about the Culinary Union, in terms of what they were talking about, is yeah, we lost our jobs in the pandemic. We have a lot of efforts to make sure that we have the right to return. We haven't even recovered more than half of our jobs. Yeah. Well, whose fault is that? It's because of you guys, your efforts that gave them margins of victory to pump Sisolak and all these other Democrats who were backed by Jim Murren, who greatly profited from the pandemic. And guess what? Guess what? You guys haven't gotten your jobs back. And not to mention that Florida, all these tourist heavy states have not suffered as much. Now, why is that? It's hypocrisy. You guys were responsible largely for the shutdowns because you guys were the one that were pumping these scums into power. And look who you also pumped. Sleepy Joe? Well, look what he's doing for our country. This is just absolutely astonishing. And by the way, it's interesting how a lot of other left-wing groups, they weren't in support of this because they knew that this was going to lead to racial profiling. It's kind of like Rudy Giuliani all over again, Michael Bloomberg all over again. Michael Bloomberg was the one that brought all this stop and frisk. The Republicans were against it. I'm telling you, it's double standards. Look how all things have changed. The torch has been switched. Unbelievable. It's just crazy. Now, going back to the Nevada legislature, I have to tell you this, that Assemblywoman Dickman and Annie Black were prevented from voting in the legislature because they were not wearing a mask. Now, the CDC made a guideline mentioning the fact that you don't have to wear a mask if you're vaccinated. So how the hell do they know if these two people were vaccinated? They are using their authoritarian approach, which I believe it's unconstitutional, which I believe it's illegal to strip their voting powers. It's absolutely sick. And there's going to be a lawsuit against this. Unbelievable. Now, switching gears. Speaking of all this race card and identity politics, the efforts of Lori Lightfoot is backfiring. She's saying, yeah, I'm not going to speak to press members who are white. First of all, how the hell do you know if somebody is white? Am I counted as white? The U.S. Census counts Persian descent as white. How do you know? Because if you look at me, I don't have light colored skin. I don't look very European. How do you distinguish between that? And you guys are doing discrimination. The only difference is that you guys are now more focused more on reverse discrimination. It's no coincidence why many counties in Idaho are willing to break up. They're getting fed up with this crap. They're getting sick of it. They voted to leave the state. They want to redraw the boundaries and join Idaho. Perhaps Washington, perhaps parts of California, Nevada should do the same. And frankly, the Mountain West and the Great Plains may want to consider splitting up from the country. And they might as well let Alberta and Saskatchewan join too, because I think they're getting sick and tired of Justin Trudeau. Anyway, still have hope. We're going to see how this audit goes through. Now, don't get me wrong. There was a lot of things I wasn't a fan of Trump, but we still have to know who truly won the election and whether cheating has been going on for many years and other races as well. The final topic I want to talk about is the Clark County Lands Bill. As you know, I have been pretty critical of the Bureau of Land Management. How you have to nominate a land that's owned by the federal government if you want to do development, where they own something about 90% of the land. given the pressure of developers and demand for more housing, Catherine Cortez Masto drew a bill which had bipartisan support, which would increase the number of conservation acres, but would also expand the BLM disposal boundary even further, including the lands that I've talked about that I'm interested in building on the outskirts of the Las Vegas Valley, several miles away from the Strip, if you're heading towards California or perhaps towards Utah. So this would mean the specific land that I'm looking at, the Hidden Valley, which I've talked about for years, is slated for development. So I have to go nominate the land, and I can basically, if I am the bidder that they're looking for, I can build what I want to build. Now, this is fairly good news. However, keep in mind that this has to go through Congress and has to be signed by law, believe it or not. The question is, can it pass? Will it make things easier? And is there opposition? First of all, there's a lot of people who are not happy with the fact that Las Vegas is going to continue to spread out. And I've been very critical of the way Las Vegas builds things, how they spread out, how they build neighborhoods, how they do the planning, the roads, the streets, the land use, zoning on the outskirts. I've done many protests about it, the boom and bust cycles. However, if we want us to spread out more efficiently, I suggest let's get rid of the regulations that encourage this system that we've had for many, many decades, such as parking minimums, building setbacks, large-scale single-use zoning complexes, large collector roads, the cul-de-sacs, etc. This system is responsible for much of the problems. Now, a lot of these environmental advocates say, hey, why do we have to keep spreading out? Well, because if you limit land production, what's going to happen is the lack of land is likely going to drive up prices, just like what we're seeing in much of California. So we don't want that, do we? No. And people will say, well, then we can have affordable housing because Horsford, Sisolak, many of these people even admitted that the BLM can bring in land availability to develop affordable housing. But it's not just affordable housing, it has to be reasonably priced homes for the middle class. And we know that restricting land supply, not to mention you have restrictions of going up, it's going to mean that you're going to have scarcity and prices are going to go up, very likely. Now, I have done a lot of messaging to organizations like the Sierra Club, the Southern Nevada chapter, and I told them about this. We agreed on many issues, but hopefully I'll be able to get an interview. And there have been many organizations out there like Plan, Mi Familia Vota, many of these pro-immigrant minority organizations that are against it because it's going to create more traffic, more congestion. Now, first of all, they don't understand that we can build differently. And number two, they're failing to understand what's causing spread out development. But the article, which I'm going to list below, even admitted that the spread out development is largely caused by white flight. You see, as you know, in the last few decades, as Vegas grew a lot of minorities moved into the older areas, and the whites fled. They moved to Henderson, Summerlin, Southern Highlands, Centennial, etc., the lakes, Spanish Trails, because they wanted to get away with the so-called diversity. And now they dress up their neighborhoods. They have these standards and buildings and maintenance. They live in these guard-gated areas. Perhaps that's why we have them. Guess what? It's just a sign of saying that we don't like the status quo. We don't like the change. We want to hide ourselves. And they don't want to admit that we have an administration that is encouraging massive immigration with these caravans, and it's going to create more white flight, believe it or not. So they need to admit that mass immigration is part of the reason why people spread out. However, if you want to spread out, that does not mean you have to do it in the ways that we've been used to for many decades. The way you spread out is you can look at our old-fashioned cities, redistribute traffic. You can You have an interconnected, more grid system. You adopt more mixed use. You get rid of the building setbacks. You put parking hidden or on the street. You separate highways and the streets. You encourage pedestrian life, which increases the chances of transit. You deliver a wide range of housing sizes, including large lot homes. There are many ways that you can do to actually build and grow more successfully, which I will explain in a future video. But people need to have their minds open to new ideas. That's the problem. They're used to it, and you need to do what you can to make sure that you spread my videos and understand what's going on. All right, other than that, I'm very confident the future is looking bright. Thank you guys so much. Please spread the videos. Have fun.